Welcome to the second video in my series about Pathologic Classic HD, which I have entitled, There Will Always Be Sacrifice in the End. This video is about the Haruspex and Changeling storylines. If you are already confused, I would recommend that you start with my first video, in which I introduced Pathologic and my plan for this video series. I also give an overview of the Bachelor's storyline and discuss his character's perspective on his ending, as well as make many jokes at his expense. You absolutely do not need to watch that video if you're only interested in the Haruspex and Changeling routes, but fair warning, from here on out I will assume that you have at least a passing familiarity with the lore of Pathologic and with what happens in the Bachelor storyline. With all of that out of the way, let's dive right in. Part 3. The Haruspex and his ending. The Haruspex route is undoubtedly the hardest of the three routes in Pathologic. Artemi... Do I even want to try it? Burach. No, I'm just gonna anglicize it again. Burach arrives in town after being summoned by a disconcerting letter from his father, Isidore Burach, indicating that his father is dying and hoping that Artemi... Is it Artemi or Artemi? Dang, I realize that I'm not being consistent in how I pronounce this. Okay, just a second. How to pronounce Artemi. Artemi. Yeah, here we go.
Pronouncenames.com.
Artemi. Okay. Artemi. That's... Artemi. Okay, I can't do it Russian way either. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce anything. Artemi Burach arrives in town after being summoned by a disconcerting letter from his father, Isidore Burach, indicating that his father is dying and hoping that Artemi will take on some sort of inheritance. Artemi is immediately attacked by a group of locals who mistakenly believe him to be Simon Kane's killer, and probably Isidore's killer as well, even though Artemi finds it ridiculous that anyone would think him capable of patricide. Yeah, you remember how in Daniil's route people briefly believed that a guy they referred to as Ripper was responsible for the deaths? That's Artemi! Over the course of the day, Artemi learns that half the town thinks he's guilty, including his childhood friend Ruben, and wouldn't you know it, Bachelor Daniil Dankovsky. See, it turns out when you aren't playing as a particular character and nudging them to make the better choices between their inclinations, they don't always make that better choice. In Daniil's case, he becomes swept away in his anger at finding Simon Kane dead and decides to go after Artemi, the local suspect, until he discovers late in the day that the plague was probably at fault. Once he has finally calmed down, he will inform Artemi of this fact, though a plague does not seem to fully explain the death of Artemi's father, given that multiple sources confirm Isidore was stabbed by a large bone. Artemi is told by some of his remaining allies that his focus should be on finding his inheritance, whatever that means. This leads him to Aspity, a mysterious young woman who is connected with a kin who gives him a chest from his father. The chest contains herbs and recipes for herbal tinctures, as well as a mysterious symbol. Artemi talks to a butcher about the symbol who tells him that he does not know exactly what it represents, but he does know it is connected to the Supremes. As you later find out, the Supremes are aurochs, a nearly extinct species of giant bull that are sometimes sacrificed in the abattoir by the kin's foreman in times of particular need. In addition to investigating his inheritance, Artemi spends time helping Daniil with his research. He procures the infected tissue and the live heart that as Daniil you mostly had to hunt down on your own. On day 4, he also finally manages to track down Ruben, who apologizes to Artemi for thinking that he murdered his father. Then after leaving him, Artemi is immediately beaten by Sabarov's men and taken prisoner. As Artemi, you have to save yourself since Daniil is... kinda useless. I guess he gets to do more of the vaccine research since he is you doing his chores for him, which is really what he wanted to do in the first place. As in the Bachelor's route, Daniil and Ruben eventually develop a vaccine to the sand pest. Daniil is initially hopeful that he will further be able to help Artemi redevelop his father's cure to the plague, referred to as a panacea, by making his serum from a bull's blood. Artemi finds the bull he needs with some worms who ask him to sacrifice the animal, given that he is authorized to do so as a Manku. Probably. See, there's actually a bit of debate around this within the kin, given that Artemy has been away from home for so long, even though he does come from a family of Mankus. At any rate, Artemy successfully performs the sacrifice, and Daniil analyzes the blood from the bowl, eventually concluding that it is close to what Artemy needs, but does not contain quite the right antibodies. For that, they would need some sort of human-bull hybrid, which would of course be impossible. On day 7, the Inquisitor finally arrives. Artemy spends the day trying to track her down, hoping to find her before she finds him, in the hopes that he can convince her to spare him. As you find out more clearly in Artemy's route, Aglaia has been tasked by the powers that be to come up with a cure to the sand pest. However, as Artemy is the one who is closest to developing a cure, Aglaia is suspicious of him, initially assuming that he has been working on the panacea because he has been manipulated by the powers that be to cause her downfall. Artemy convinces her that his decision to pursue the cure has nothing to do with external politics, however, and everything to do with the love and duty he feels, both to Isidore and to the town. Aglaia has a sudden change of heart at hearing his motives, and points him to Foreman O'Yoon, the leader of the kin who lives in the abattoir, whom she suspects may be able to help Artemy given that she learned O'Yoon recently killed the last Supreme in the hopes that it would appease the earth and stop the plague. Mostly to get him to go away. O'Yoon gives Artemy a vial of blood, which he claims was from the slaughtered Supreme, and using this blood, Artemy is finally able to create a panacea. Of course, it's just one dose of the cure. Artemy is going to need more blood if he is to make enough panacea to save the whole town. This is where Artemy's story really starts to pick up. The next day, Artemy visits Foreman O'Yoon again. O'Yoon informs Artemy that he does not know him, and Artemy suspects that there was something missing from the inheritance chest that Aspity gave him. When he confronts her about this, she confesses that she kept behind a bone horn that serves as proof that Artemy is a true Manku, someone who knows the physical and spiritual lines of how to cut a body open. She insists that she only kept it to protect Artemy because once he enters on this path, there is no going back. With the bone horn, Foreman O'Yoon finally acknowledges Artemy. Artemy suspects there is more to the blood that O'Yoon gave him, considering that the Supreme had been slaughtered the day before, but the blood he had been given was still hot and alive. O'Yoon explains that there are currents of bull blood that flow underneath the town, having been fed by hundreds of years of bull sacrifices. This blood is kept very much alive, but can only be extracted by the foreman. Over the next few days, O'Yoon subjects Artemy to a series of trials that seem designed to simply kill him. And, yeah, accurate. This was literally their purpose. You see, Artemy is basically undergoing a process of becoming the new foreman, and understandably, O'Yoon doesn't particularly want to give up his job. The best part is that one of the days you have to free Daniil, who has been kidnapped and imprisoned by a gang of children because he gave them blank rifle cartridges when they wanted, real rifle cartridges, because of course Daniil did. Also, you are treated to this nightmare-inducing cinematic the next day. As Artemy completes the trials, O'Yoon gives him more information on the symbol Artemy found with his father's belongings. Specifically, it represents an udurg, which again, I know I'm not pronouncing right, I am very sorry, which means a body that contains the world. Isidore's notes mention the need to protect this udurg at all costs, and Artemy questions what specifically his father was referring to. Foreman O'Yoon gives him one interpretation. The kin believed that the town was built on the back of a bull. Not a metaphorical bull, a literal bull that is part of the earth. The veins of blood running underneath the town are quite literally the bull's veins, which is why the blood is alive despite having been drained from animal sacrifices and poured down into the earth. The relationship between the bull and the town is symbiotic. The abattoir feeds the bull with sacrifices, and in turn the bull sustains the town, allowing this strange anachronistic place to survive. In this way, the town and the bull it is built on are indeed a body that contains the world. However, if you talk to Daniil, he offers you an alternative explanation. The udurg is Simon Kane, whose soul will soon be transferred to the polyhedron. On some level, every person's mind contains its own world, but Simon Kane was and is different. He is superhuman, and once the polyhedron absorbs Simon's soul, it will truly become a body that contains the world of Simon Kane's extraordinary mind. And while this might seem less likely than the kin's interpretation, don't be too quick to dismiss it. After all, this might explain why Simon Kane was the last person Isidore treated, and why Isidore sent Daniil the letter summoning Daniil to the town around the same time that he sent Artemy his letter. As Artemy ponders all of this, he faces the culmination of the trials. Oyun wants Artemy to jump into a pit that he claims will take him down into the lines of Suak. Suak being the consuming darkness that the kin believe lives beneath the ground, having been eaten by Boss Turok, the World Bull, to protect the universe from destruction. You might be thinking, jumping into a pit? This seems like maybe not the best idea. This seems like, I don't know, it might lead to certain death. Well, for all of you unbelievers out there, let me show you what happens when Artemy jumps into the pit. You are absolutely right. It turns out this does kill him. See? Look at Artemy's dead body right there. So sad. Moment of silence for our king. The only way to survive the trial is by talking to Clara before you engage in it, such that she will offer to sacrifice one of her bound on Artemy's behalf once he falls into the pit. Pro tip, this only works once. Jumping into the pit after that definitely kills Artemy. Not that I know, because I thought it was hilarious to keep jumping into the pit or anything. Hey, this isn't Pathologic 2. Mark doesn't care if you die. Artemy returns to the utter shock of the foreman, who confesses that he is the one that killed Artemy's father, as Isidore had been preparing to become the foreman of the kin for the same reasons that Artemy now is, so that he could access the veins of blood running underneath the abattoir for the purpose of making enough panacea to keep the town alive. Artemy then fights and kills the foreman in one of the greatest boxing rings of all time. Just look at this good boy. Also, there are no entrances, there are no exits. How did they get in here? Upon Oyun's death, Artemy assumes the mantle of foreman to the general approval of the kin who had seen Oyun as bad at his job, given that he had sacrificed a supreme and nothing had happened with respect to the plague. However, the butchers will not show Artemy the location of the underground blood until Artemy makes a sacrifice of blood that is proportionate to the people of the town, the people Artemy is trying to save. Oyun unfortunately was not enough, given that he was not a true foreman. On day 12, just like Daniil, if Artemy has preserved his bound, which in his case are an adorable gaggle of children, Marky, you are just too freaking cute, he is allowed access to the cathedral. This time it is Artemy who Commander Block trusts to make the decision, given that Aglaia, who he again does not trust at all, appears to have little to no influence over him. Despite the alternative interpretation for the Udurg that Daniil presents to Artemy, the choice that Artemy provides to the commander is to save the town and destroy the polyhedron. By destroying the polyhedron, Artemy will be sacrificing Simon Kane, a being commensurate to the town. In a side quest, Artemy learns that the base of the polyhedron indeed bleeds the bull's lifeblood from time to time. As such, with the destruction of the polyhedron, the earth will bleed. Artemy will be able to draw from the blood flowing from the base of the polyhedron to make his panacea. As SulMatul points out in his Pathologic video, Artemy has, essentially, a full hero's journey. A journey that is completely centered around his town and his people. He receives a call and struggles through a series of trials over the 12 days, guided by a mentor in the form of the journal entries from his father that Artemy finds in his inheritance stash. Depending on how you play it, he even literally dies and is reborn as the leader of the kin. It makes sense then that Artemy would choose to save the town at the expense of the polyhedron. Artemy's story is one of love and duty, first to his father and then to his town. In fact, one of the things that really struck me as I started playing the Haruspex route is how I suddenly felt wanted by the town. I felt a part of it. Sure, for a while half of the people think you're a murderer and want you dead, and Oyun spends the last days actively trying to kill you, but there's a good portion of the town, especially among the kin, who are excited that Artemy is back, who believe in Artemy, who want Artemy to succeed. I mean, look at the Odong, which is a more formal word for worms. It actually means something akin to shepherd. They won't even talk to Daniil, but they will trade with Artemy. You know, you give this man a kidney, and he gives you some herbs, and, you know, Artemy just has this bag of kidneys he just walks around town with. Unrefrigerated. This is fine. I'm just gonna walk up to this man and take his kidney, not both of them, just the one, just a little bit of blood, take out his heart. There was actually some discussion on the Ice Pick Lodge Discord about how Artemy removes all of the organs, given that you don't actually see him using a scalpel, and he can remove organs even starting from the beginning of the game, and he doesn't have anything, any sort of weapons then. So, like, does Artemy just literally rip the bodies open? Is that why he's called the Ripper? He's just down there being like, yep, I'm just gonna rip open this man's thorax and reach in and grab his heart. I'm really concerned about Artemy, okay? Can someone check on Artemy? By contrast, Daniil never really feels accepted. Half of his fights occur because he knows that a certain thing needs to be done and has to struggle against the town's leaders or traditions to make it happen. When you're in Daniil's head, sacrificing the town for the possibility of a better future feels like it might be the right option. But despite the fact that the game takes pains to convince you it is an equally valid option for Artemy, it feels almost unthinkable. The kin are your people. The abattoir is sacred. It cannot be replaced. The polyhedron is fascinating, but it is also new, and it cannot override thousands of years of tradition. Of your tradition. No, the town must be preserved, even if it means destroying the miracle of the polyhedron. All of this brings us to Clara. Part 4. The Changeling and her ending. Clara's route is... well, it's not really finished, for one, and that makes discussing her story arc complicated. Though I am going to spend quite a bit of time discussing her story because I feel like Clara's arc is very interesting and really hasn't gotten the love that it deserves on YouTube so far. Clara wakes up in an open grave with no memory of how she got there, so that's fun. You learn over the course of her story that this is because Clara did not exist before the grave. She was literally birthed by the earth. She isn't fully human, which is why Clara has special abilities that the other two healers don't possess. For one, Clara has magic hands. That's not a joke. She literally has magic hands. Whereas Daniil and Artemy fight the old-fashioned way with their fists, Clara's attacks look like this. This psychic attack isn't very strong, but has the distinct advantage of not requiring you to get very close to whoever it is you're attacking. I know some people dislike her weak baby hands attacks. Given that my fist fights as Artemy or Daniil usually ended like this, and using weapons requires constant upkeep, and in the case of guns, compulsively chasing down children in the streets to trade literal garbage that you found in the dumpsters for ammo. Hey kid! Hey, wait up, wait! I need your bullets! I am a big fan. Clara can also heal the infected with her hands by sacrificing a bit of her health, which is very useful because each healing gives you a healthy reputation boost, and Clara's reputation is constantly dropping. Reputation is one of the many stats that you have to manage in Pathologic. It doesn't really come up for Daniil, because unless you start instigating fights in the street, everyone generally respects him. It does come up for Artemy, who starts with an abysmally low reputation given that, the people think he's a serial killer. Once your reputation drops enough, people in shops will no longer trade with you, randos on the street will even start trying to hunt you down. It's a lot of fun. And for Clara, even though she wakes up for the first time on day 1, she is already known for being a thief and a liar, and once the plague starts, for potentially being the plague carrier, intentionally spreading the plague throughout the town. Give me a second on these points. I'm going to circle back to them in just a moment. At any rate, I am a big fan of Clara's magic hands, and I even made up a song about them that, yes, I sang to myself. alone in my apartment while playing Pathologic, because that's the kind of person I am. I will perform it for you now. Why am I doing this? Okay. Magic hands, Clara's got the magic hands. She sticks her hands onto a man and bam, she's healed with her magic hands. Yes, thank you. Ice Pick Lodge, you are free to use that in Pathologic too. When you finally do Clara's route in 2030. Clara also has the ability to hypnotize people if she knows a secret about them. Because of this ability, Clara is able to learn information that neither Daniil nor Artemy has access to. On top of that, Clara seems to have some level of clairvoyant ability. She often knows, or at least is able to easily figure out, information that she has not been told but which you, the player, probably know, given that Clara can only be unlocked after you play at least one of the Bachelor or the Haruspex. And finally, Clara cannot lie. You might be wondering how that works, given that I have just told you that Clara is known for being a thief and a liar. And she most certainly is. One of the game mechanics is that you can break into people's houses using a lockpick and rob them. I never did it as Daniil or Artemy, and I often ended up getting rid of lockpicks that I found as them because they took up valuable inventory space. But with Clara, her lockpicks stack in her inventory. As such, you were incentivized to hoard them and use them, which I did occasionally even when I really did not need to. Clara also lies, and depending on your choices, Clara can lie a lot. That hypnosis ability, she uses that early in the game on the behalf of her adopted father, Alexander Saburov. Yeah, remember him? The one who got emergency powers and then immediately abused them? Well, surprise, surprise, he's convinced that some of the town's more outcast citizens are connected to the plague. When you talk to them, however, you find out that while they are all carrying deep secrets, none of them has anything to do with the spreading of the disease. Upon reporting your findings to Saburov, he'll ask you whether they are connected to it. The smart answer is no, even though you'll take a reputation hit, as by admitting that these people are not connected to the disease, the blame for spreading of the plague shifts back to you. But still, this is the truth. Moreover, the people that Saburov wants you to talk to all end up being members of your band, whom you already know by this point you need to protect in order to be allowed into the cathedral at the end of the game. However, you can certainly lie and tell Saburov that they are responsible. And yet, Clara cannot lie. Once uttered, this becomes the truth, and whomever you sold out to Saburov immediately becomes infected. Of course, this is leaving out the biggest and most important lie that Clara tells, and for that, let me actually dive into Clara's story. After Clara wakes up in the cemetery, she is adopted by the Saburovs. We've already met Alexander. His wife Katerina is a clairvoyant. Kind of. See, at one point, the town had 3 mistresses. 3 women who possessed clairvoyant ability. These were Nina Kana, Victoria Olgamskaya, and Katerina Saburova. However, compared to Nina and Victoria, Katerina's prophecies were always vague and cloudy. There are reasons for this that I'll get into in a minute, but in this case, they did at least lead her to you. Alexander mostly believes his wife when she says that Clara is a miracle worker, but he's already heard the rumors about her. To save herself, Clara lies and says that she has an evil twin sister, insisting that she is good and miraculous. And you, the player, know that this is a lie because in an aside, Clara tells you as much. I've just had to tell a lie for the first time in my life, to invent a fictional sister and shift all those outrageous accusations to her. Strange I could even utter the words. But I promise when it all clears up, I'll explain myself and undo that lie. You would think that Saburov would be suspicious of the... wait a second, that's not me. That's my evil twin sister, obviously. But he does buy it, mostly. However, before he will join Team Clara, he wants proof of her divinity. He sends her down to the train station where he's heard that there's been a fight. Yeah, there was. I'm looking at you, Chad Artemy, in the hopes that she can heal one of the victims in front of a witness. She doesn't find any survivors from the fight, but she does meet Saburov's witness and a boy named Lika. If you've played the Haruspex route by this point, I guarantee you remember Lika. On day 1 of the Haruspex story, Artemy meets up with a gang of children, and their leader offers him a revolver in exchange for killing a gang defector. That defector is this dog boy right here. Yes, Pathologic goes there. Child murder is 100% on the table. You shouldn't do it, by the way. I certainly didn't. There are other gun options, and not killing the kid ends up giving you a big reputation boost, to the point that Artemy will no longer be chased down in the streets. But if you're going into the game blind, you probably don't know all that, and you've already seen that the town basically all seems to hate you. The offer is, therefore, real tempting. In Clara's storyline, Artemy tried but failed to kill Lika. If you press the kid about why people want him dead, he'll reluctantly spill his guts to you. You see, you get it? Because he's been stabbed and he's bleeding. I'm so sorry. I wrote it, and then I realized what I had written, and then I had to make a pun out of it. It turns out the kid's kinda devious. Clara tries to heal him anyways, of course. He's just an idiot child after all. And that's that. The boy goes back to his life, he mends his ways, and, no, actually, he dies. Well, nothing left to do but go through his pockets and look for loose change. When you talk to the witness, he doesn't condemn you for what happened. Oh no, he decides that your miraculous ability judged him unworthy of healing. You still need to successfully heal someone to appease Saburov though, so you eventually do track down one of the survivors from the train station battle, meeting both Artemy and Daniil in the process. Artemy had taken the man back to his lair and, really, Artemy? Really? You were just going to let him bleed out and then harvest his kidneys? The Clara version of Artemy is so shady. Daniil is waiting at the house where the man eventually collapsed, but indicates to you that the man is too far gone. There's nothing he can do for the poor fellow. Then you freaking blow Daniil's science man brain by miraculously healing the guy right in front of him. The next few days are, as I've mentioned, you questioning various people around town on the behalf of Alexander. You also try to sway some of the town's more borderline members to your faction at the behest of Katerina. You learn some interesting information about the town's residents, but otherwise the days are fairly uneventful. Except, you start getting these letters. They're strange, to say the least. They ramble on about the town, about a nebulous law with a capital L, about your bound. They're unsigned, but the writer refers to you as being, well, their sister. On day 5, you receive a letter from Capella, who has had a dream about everyone in the cathedral dying and wants you to check on the people inside. You do so, and they all appear to be fine. And yet that night, you get a letter from your sister saying that she is going to visit the cathedral, and, well, we already know how this ends. Poorly, in case you've forgotten. It all ends poorly. Day 6 is a very difficult day for Clara. With everyone in the cathedral dead, blame turns to her. Her reputation absolutely plummets. But most importantly, you meet your sister for the first time. And it turns out, she looks exactly like Clara. You see, like I said, Clara can't lie. And by telling Alexander that she has a sister who is responsible for the misdeeds she has been blamed for, Clara has literally spoken her evil twin into existence. It's worse than that, however. Her twin is, in fact, the embodiment of the plague. Wherever Clara's double goes, that district immediately becomes infected. I don't know if you are familiar with the folklore surrounding changelings. I was, but there was also a weirdly high amount of fairy-related media that came out when I was a kid, and I suspect that many people watching this video do not know what a changeling is. According to folklore, fairies will sometimes kidnap a child, typically as a baby, and often because the child is uncommonly cute or beautiful. In the lost child's place, the fairies will leave a changeling, a fairy child that generally resembles a human but with something, well, a bit off about them. The child will usually grow up to be less conventionally attractive, not that there's anything wrong with that, blame the old Europeans and their folklore, not me. The child will usually also have weirdly uncanny intelligence and insight. It is therefore no coincidence that Clara is also referred to as the changeling, given that she does have uncanny intelligence and insight, and that her story revolves around being blamed for the deeds of the identical sister she has unwittingly created. And it is never quite clear what Clara's sister is. Both Daniil and Artemy meet Clara, of course, and she often seems to be in two places at once, such as on day 6 of the Haruspex route, where she will be seen with both Katerina and with Grace, the cemetery's caretaker, throughout the day. You're never quite sure which one you're talking to, however. One of the children tells Daniil that Clara's double can be told apart from Clara because she won't talk at all, but that ends up not being true at all. As Clara, the standing dialogue for characters is also unsettling, with them referencing that you have just been there to talk with them, even though you know you have not. On day 6, this character here, Yulia, will even note that she gave you some items that were found in the cathedral, even though this never happened. However, neither Daniil nor Artemy ever sees both versions of Clara at the same time. Even in Clara's story, with one exception, she is always alone whenever she talks to her sister. So, is evil Clara really a second girl? Perhaps birthed by the earth at the same time that Clara lied about her existence? Is she a projection of Clara's power? The one day you do talk to your sister with other people around, this is more or less what she claims, that she's a figment of Clara's imagination, though she also says that she is the persecuted saint and you are the disease. Is Clara herself her evil sister? Is she simply forgetting that she is committing the misdeeds attributed to her sister and disassociating every time she quote-unquote sees her sister? This is what the Inquisitor evidently thinks. I will say that as I was playing the Changeling route, the thought struck me that you have a lot of free time as Clara. I'm sure that's because development of her story was rushed, but knowing the game, I wouldn't totally put this being an intentional choice past the developers. That Clara has so much free time because in that time, Clara is unwittingly going around being evil Clara. Nikolai, just go ahead and take credit for this, it's fine. The rest of Clara's story is the mostly unfinished part. After day 6, your side quests are all the same. You have to find your sister in an infected district and drive her away, or the district will be infected for the rest of the game. Also, without your moderating influence as the player, Artemy and Daniil have decided that they straight up hate each other. Daniil sees Artemy as a dangerous serial killer, and Artemy sees Daniil as an unfeeling city boy. I'm so sorry. I'm obsessed with the fact that this character here, Bad Grief, randomly has a southern accent. Literally no other character in the game has a southern accent, and he refers to Daniil as city boy.
The city boy grabbed too much power for his own good. This ain't gonna end well.
Daniil and Artemy are now out for each other's blood, and really, boys? Really? I just want to point out that when you play as Artemy in his route, Daniil sends Artemy a letter on day 2 that he awkwardly signs as your friend, hopefully. But without me there, you two just want to kill each other. Each day you can warn them that the other is looking for them, or you can sell one out to the other. In case you can't tell already, Clara is firmly in the chaotic good territory. Well, also in the chaotic evil territory simultaneously. Look, she's a complicated girl, alright. Importantly, though, Claire learns something interesting about her powers. At this point in the game, you've probably already found out that Ruben, who helped Daniil develop the vaccine to the sand pest, did so by dissecting Simon Kane, the guy that Daniil came to the town in the first place to see but died before he could meet him. It turns out that Simon was not totally dead. He was mostly dead, but his body was in some sort of stasis, his blood somehow miraculously able to prevent the disease from killing him completely. Ruben figures out that when Claire heals a person, she transforms their blood. If Claire were to perform this transformation on one of her bound, who have special blood, it would make their blood like Simon's, and more importantly, like the blood that Artemy needs to make more panacea. Therefore, Clara spends her second to last day convincing her bound to undergo this transformation and to sacrifice themselves to cure the town. On day 12, if Clara has preserved her bound, she is allowed access to the cathedral and presents this third option to Commander Block. Neither the town nor the polyhedron must be destroyed. The only sacrifice that must be made is that of her bound. The blood of 7 of them should be enough for Artemy to create enough panacea for the whole town. I know that H-Bomber Guy said in his Pathologic video that this was his favorite ending. I don't agree. This is my least favorite of the characters' endings for reasons that I will get into more deeply in the next video. But it does feel right for Clara. Clara is impossible. She shouldn't be able to heal people with her hands. She shouldn't be able to invent a twin sister out of thin air. She shouldn't be able to be best friends with this Earth thing. This is the albino, by the way, and I mainly show it because the way it runs is incredible. Go! Run on those little goat giraffe legs! Gosh, I love this weird dude. Claire can do all that, however. But if you talk to her sister in the cathedral on the last day, she says something else. The true miracle is that Clara stole for herself a third option. Even though she was branded a thief and a liar, she did work miracles. The biggest miracle of them all being able to save both the town and the polyhedron. She was aware of the stakes, far more than either Daniil and Artemy, again for reasons that I will get into in the next video, and she was able to choose her own fate. In many ways, Claire's route is a coming-of-age story. Claire is literally born on the first day, and she grapples with her personhood throughout the game. Her dialogue options are often snarky and irreverent. I love this one. There's a well right there, and her dialogue option is just, "Can I spit in it?" Classic. But they also vary wildly between the option to proclaim yourself a saint and a sinner, to forgive and to accuse. They match the fact that Clara has a dual personality. Yes, because she is somehow simultaneously a literal miracle worker and the embodiment of the plague, but also the Clara you play as is struggling with the fact that she wants so desperately to be good and to save people, but she is incentivized to be a thief. She's incentivized to lie, and sometimes she cannot escape lying. I think part of the reason that Claire's evil twin scares her so much is that Claire can see herself slipping into that role. Perhaps she has already, if you believe that Claire and her evil twin are the same person. There's an interesting comparison to be made between Clara and Katerina Saburova, who Clara may or may not end up replacing as a mistress. When you start the game, Katerina is known as the only full mistress still in the town, though Maria Kayna, who you've gotten to know in the Bachelor story, and Kapella Olganskaya, who you get to know through the Haruspex story, both have some clairvoyant abilities and will likely become mistresses like their mothers before them. However, Katerina has the reputation for being far less able than Nina Kayna and Victoria Olganskaya, the deceased mistresses. There are complicated reasons for this. Some of them stem from the fact that Katerina tried to fill the various roles of Nina and Victoria instead of figuring out what kind of mistress she herself is. Some of them stem from the fact that Katerina has a very bad morphine addiction.
I need morphine.
But as you learn through Clara's story, the other issue is that Katerina may never have been a true mistress to begin with. See, there's this fellow called the Rat Prophet, who I jokingly referenced a few times in my last video. He has visions of the future as well, but he also has a tendency to twist his words. It's unclear whether he's straight out lying or if he's simply framing things in a way so as to be totally misleading, but the moral of the story is that he is not to be trusted. And yet it turns out that Katerina's visions, especially lately, have actually been things that the Rat Prophet whispered to her while she was sleeping. See, Katerina's problem is really that she desperately wanted to be a mistress. She was so enamored with Nina Kayna and Victoria Olganskaya, especially Nina, that in so doing she became vulnerable to the Rat Prophet. If she had taken the time to explore who she is and what her abilities are, it might have turned out differently. Clara, by contrast, undoubtedly has supernatural powers, but she still struggles with the same issues of identity. Katerina serves as almost a warning to Clara, as a sign of what can happen when you lose your sense of personal self. Clara could just as easily become prey to her evil half if she does not realize who Clara is. To me, this is what Clara's story is about, and I wish that it was not half finished as it is, because I would really like to see what Icepick Lodge could have done with her story and her themes given the resources. In Clara's ending, she firmly establishes that she can do miracles if you just let her. And because Clara is perhaps capable of being in two places at once, she might even be able to stay in the town to fight off any future outbreaks at the same time that she leaves with the army. See, the commander of the army perceives Clara as a Joan of Arc figure, and wants her to come with him so that she can help him continue to reform the military and, I don't know, wage holy wars or something. Look, I'm not saying this is a good idea. I'm just saying that I see why going with him might appeal to Clara. And that's the thing, isn't it? With most video games that feature multiple protagonists you can choose from, the game is mostly the same regardless of who you choose. Even in games where each protagonist has their own storyline, often the protagonist's views do not conflict with each other. But with Pathologic, the game is completely different depending on who you are playing at the time. Not just because the events and experiences of the player are different, and gameplay is tweaked for each character, but because the perspective is different as well. I have never seen a game so fully immerse me into the heads of different characters, such that I could be faced with the same choice of endings for each character, and feel like it would be wrong to pick a different ending than the one my character is presenting me with. That's not just good game design, that's good writing, period. And it continues to floor me how good it is. But still, you can take a step back and look at the endings more objectively, divorcing the consequences of what will happen from what each character wants and hopes will happen. And the question arises then, which ending is actually best? That's the subject of the next video. Stick around for me to go on full-out intellectual nerd as if you thought I hadn't ascended those heights already. At any rate, thank you for watching this. If you have any interest in playing Pathologic after watching this video, please do it. Don't be scared by people telling you how difficult the game is. Pathologic honestly isn't all that hard once you figure it out. I'll leave links for the game in the description. And, like and subscribe, share with your friends. That's what people say in these videos, right? I was gonna do that bit with the rat prophet that I did from the last video, but then I realized that I just told you that the rat prophet is a liar who should not be trusted. So, the rat prophet now tells you, don't like and subscribe, don't do it. And since you know that the rat prophet is an untrustworthy fellow, you should do the opposite of that, and you should like and subscribe. I need to stop talking. Alright, see you in the next video.